All right, so this is SIM 207, Systems in Orchestrator 2012 overview. We can do this session in a few different ways, so I'm going to get a couple of questions out of you guys just to find out where you're at. I can talk about stuff, I can show you stuff, I can talk about what it can do. We can do lots of demo, we can do lots of talking and so forth, lots of Q&A. So give me a show of hands. Who's here to get some background as to what Orchestrator can actually do? Everybody, cool. Put your hands up if you would prefer lots of demo versus lots of slides. Excellent, cool. So let's spend most of the session doing demo. That's cool. So my name is Adam Hall. I am the Technical Product Manager for System Center Orchestrator, formerly known as Opalis. It's kind of a weird shaped room, so I'll kind of just roam around a little bit, except for when I'm doing demo. Please ask questions. You probably have a lot of questions. I will answer anything you ask me. Straight after this session, most of the information that I run through in this session is going to be posted out publicly. So I'm going to go through some information during this session that has not been publicly disclosed before. So you're going to be the first external people to see this information. I'm going to disclose a lot about what's going to be in the Orchestrator beta that's going to come out in about 3 or 4 weeks' time, what to expect of what's in there. I'm going to show you the demo that you clearly nearly all want. A good 90% of you wanted lots of demo. I'm going to show you a build of Orchestrator that is currently going through our final beta testing. So it is likely to be a very close build to what I show you today that comes out in beta, which will be available by June the 17th. So without further ado, I'll kick off, please. I've got these little ball things that I'll throw out for questions and so forth. As far as objectives, and I do apologize, the template for this event is rather interesting in its color scheme, so some of these slides come out rather garish. What I want you to walk out with today is to understand what Orchestrator can do, which is great because that's what you asked me for. I want you to understand that when you go back into your organizations or if you're in a partner ecosystem, what you can do with Orchestrator, where it fits inside System Center, where it fits inside a private cloud, what the role of Orchestrator is inside a private cloud, and how it's a little bit different from what you can do in a data center today. There's 3 words that I'm going to use when I describe what Orchestrator can do that if you walk out of this room with nothing else, please walk out with those 3 words. Integration, orchestration, and automation. These are the 3 things that this toolset does. They're the 3, they typically get done in that order. Orchestrator is only part of the System Center suite. It's the only way you can get the product. It is not sold standalone. Opalis was a grant into the System Center suite. Orchestrator will be a full member of System Center, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that actually means. And then as far as how can you use Orchestrator, Orchestrator is kind of like when you load Visio and you get a blank palette and someone says draw a diagram. It's like, well, what do you want to draw a diagram of? What is it that I'm drawing? Orchestrator is a little bit the same. It can do lots of things, and there's a phrase that we use which is Orchestrator does nothing, and Orchestrator does everything. Kind of depends on the way you look at it. So by default, it does absolutely nothing. You load it up and you've installed it, and I'm going to show you what the new installer looks like as well, and it does nothing. But what it can do is just about anything. Yeah, so long as it is at a technological level, chances are you can get it to work. And so one of the challenges and what I'm going to show you is some examples of how to use Orchestrator, how to get going with it, and how you can take it into your environment and start getting benefit pretty much straight away. So 2 slides on what Opalis is. Okay, so Opalis is an acquisition that we made in December of 2009. It was a runbook automation toolset on the marketplace. We bought it for 2 very good reasons. One is that it comes with a very rich data bus. And the data bus is kind of like the heart and soul of what Opalis was, and that is the publish and consume mechanism. When you do something, you create information, and then you want to do something else and you want to leverage that piece of information or a subset of that information. The data bus is the thing that as a runbook executes, that is the mechanism by which we publish and consume information throughout that execution phase. The second thing we got was a very wide range of integration packs to lots of different technologies. And the reality is that there is no data center in the world that I've ever seen that has 1 vendor in it. At a minimum, you can have 3 or 4, and that's if you're very, very strict on your hardware, software, application, and network space. So we got 28 integrations out of the box with lots of different vendors and lots of different solutions. And I go through what they are, and I'm going to go through what our intentions are for those moving forward. So where are we today with Opalis 6.3? That is our in-market product today. It will be replaced by Orchestrator later this year. But as far as all the knowledge that you build around Opalis 6.3, as you will see, it carries over very much to Orchestrator. So Opalis kind of brings everything together. And if you take a look at a data center today in a very heterogeneous environment, lots of different vendors and lots of different technologies, and they all kind of sit inside this big room at the back, or a data center if you're lucky, and they all do these different things. And pretty much you can boil down the management of a data center today into these 5 key pillars. You're either talking about service management in terms of capturing the knowledge, who asked for something, what did they get, when did they get it, how much did it cost. Provisioning, in terms of getting it out there, configuring it in the way that it's supposed to be configured, monitoring it to make sure that it's okay, and in the event that something goes wrong, being able to get back to where you were before it all went wrong. And that's pretty much where we are today. That is where we were pre-acquisition. System Center Suite kind of maps around the outside. Now, when we bought Opalis, what we got was the ability, I slipped over 2 things, the ability to pull all that together and start to reference the System Center Suite and indeed the data center as one kind of entity, which is where the first word comes in, integration. Integration means being able to reference your technology environment as a single entity. Until you can do that, the benefits of orchestration and automation don't bear their full fruit. Integration means that your technology environment has all the different bits able to talk to each other, and when you look at a process, something as simple as deploying out a server, it cuts across many different silos in terms of teams. There's the network team, the database team, the operating system team, the change control team, the service desk, the sign-off person, and so forth. Being able to cut through all of that and reference it just as a single entity, which is, I want a server, just make it go happen. Orchestration means once you've got that integration and you can reference that whole data center as one thing, being able to get all the different parts to move in the order that they should move so that you get the outcome you're looking for. And so something that we discover as people start to take on automation at the end is the requirement to really analyze what the process is that you're trying to do. What is the outcome you're looking for? What is the business process behind that? What is the technology process underneath that? And making sure that all the steps that you've got in your process are warranted, that they're done in the right order, and that they're optimal. If you take a bad process and put it through an automation engine, an integration engine such as this, and it's a bad process with many extra steps or it does something wrong, it's now going to do that really fast. Okay? A bad process is just a fast bad process. If you reimagine what your process is, work through what it could look like, and put the effort into doing the integration and the orchestration, then when you do the automation, then you get a lot of benefit. I talk to a lot of customers who are jumping straight to automation and trying to nobble all these different bits together, and they're getting some return, some value, but not a huge amount of value. And the reason is they're looking at automation as a way to fix the integration problem, which is actually kind of a little bit of a catch-22. You want to be integrated before you can automate, but in some ways automation is required to integrate, which is why we've got it in a circle. But the start point should be integration. Getting to the point where all your different bits can talk to each other in the right way is a key step in being able to benefit something like this engine. So a few concepts that I'll go through, and I'm going to use these terms, so I just want you to understand before we go through, especially since we're going to jump largely into demo. So activities, those are the nice little pretty icons that you see on the screen when we drag them out and link them together. Each one of those icons is called an activity, and each activity performs a very specific task. You configure it to do what it is supposed to do. You give it information, it does what it's supposed to do, and it gives you information back. Integration packs can be thought of as our outbound integration from Opalis/Orchestrator, from System Center out to other solutions, and indeed within System Center as well. We're going to talk a little bit more when I get into Orchestrator about what the new inbound mechanism looks like. The data bus, as I talked about, this is the publishing and consumption of information. So as we go through a runbook, the first activity does the first task, and it might go and run a command, and maybe it creates a ticket inside Service Manager. When you create that ticket, you get lots of information back. What was the GUID? What was the title? What was the description? All those pieces of information that went together to create the incident inside Service Manager. That information is now on the data bus, and you can subscribe to it and use that at any other point further down the runbook. And then runbooks themselves. You'll hear lots of different terms. You'll hear lots of different names for these. They could be workflows. They could be policies. They could be runbooks, whatever you want to call them. We did a lot of work with Gartner and Forrester and IDC and basically said, what should we call these things? What is the common term that the industry should use when you link a bunch of stuff together and execute it? What should we call that? So we've basically agreed on runbooks. That's what we will be using. A lot of the Opalis components, when they move to Orchestrator, get renamed. In fact, just about everything gets renamed. And so Action Server, for those of you that know Opalis, will become Runbook Server. The Opalis client becomes the Runbook Designer, and so forth. So talking about automating across those silos, and here's a sort of a nice, easy example there. You just want to deploy a virtual machine into a virtual environment. It sort of sounds fairly simple, but if you look at what silos and what parts of an organization that data actually cuts across, you're going to get an event request come in. So the event management team's involved, somebody wants something. Okay, deploy a machine as a change control, put that in the service desk, update the CMDB. We're going to put a new asset out there, a new piece of technology, a new reference bit is out there. Do the configuration, drop out the virtual machine, add some storage, join it to the network, add it to the domain, associate a service, put an application onto it, update the CMDB again, and then close the request out and tell someone that it's now over there. You basically cut across at least 3 or 4 teams in most customer organizations. A lot of manual process is quite often involved. You have a lot of integration and automation at individual layers, but cutting across those is where the real value is. And that's when you reimagine your processes and think about, is that the smartest way to actually achieve that outcome? It may be, and that's great if it is. But in a lot of cases, we can cut out a lot of those steps and we can speed these things up. If you want to go have a play with Opalis at a production level, you can go to www.opalis.com. That will warp you to the correct site. As far as licensing goes, Opalis has been granted from the subsidiary into Microsoft. So Microsoft customers that have the SMS E&D licensing suite, SPLA and eCal. If you own those, you have rights to Opalis and to use it. There is a 180-day trial on Microsoft.com. There is also the full version with all the license keys also on Microsoft.com. The reason for that is it's a subsidiary. We can't put it onto volume licensing. We can't put it onto TechNet and SDN and so forth. So that's where we are today. Any questions on any of that before I carry on? Good. Old stuff. Gone. Right. Rest of the session is going to be about Orchestrator. Let's set the scene. So there's 3 key areas that we're going to invest in. The first one already exists. So the IT Pro experience, this is the authoring, the debugging, the scripting engines. This is creating runbooks and making sure that they work. That has changed very little with Orchestrator. Okay, that is basically the same now. If you've used, who's used Opalis in the room, by the way, just as a question? All right, so if you guys who have created runbooks in Opalis, it's exactly the same in Orchestrator. When I show you the console, those of you who have seen Opalis will go, hey, it didn't change, other than the name at the top. It's pretty close. There's some code under the hood that's changed, but as far as the experience and the knowledge required to create a runbook in the client, that has not changed at all. Where we are investing is 3 key areas. The operator. This is a new IIS Silverlight console. It allows us to start, stop, interact with, debug, track what's going on. We can get analysis and so forth out of it. So you can see what's going on. We can start runbooks. We can troubleshoot when they don't work. You can see exactly why they didn't work. And then we can let people know, hey, your runbook didn't work for whatever reason. From a developer aspect, we have a new PowerShell provider coming for Orchestrator, and we have a new web service. So the web service actually sits underneath everything else that's new. It's a new OData RESTful service that sits there, very rich. That is what the Silverlight console talks to. It is what the PowerShell provider talks to. And it is also what the last component there, the IT Business Manager, is also where the reporting and analysis comes from. Okay, so I'm going to go through all of those except for the PowerShell provider. And that's simply because the PowerShell provider is not in the beta. It will come in a post-beta release, either as a beta 2 or as a release candidate later this year. Didn't quite make the check-in for the beta. Oh, that's interesting. Updated that. Here we go. So the way it all comes together, we have at the top left, this is the Runbook Designer. These are the activities. You can drag them out. I'm going to show you all of this. I just want to set the scene before we do it. These are the activities that you drag out. You link them together to create your runbook. We provide those 28 integration packs, and there will be a subset of those available for the Orchestrator beta. And they are designed to get you going. They will not ever do everything that you ever want to do with Opalis. We do not intend on creating an integration pack for every solution in the world with an activity for everything you could possibly do in every solution in the world. That's just not going to happen. The reality is that the integration packs are designed to get you quickly going with the main functions that you want to do against the system you want to integrate with. When you don't have an integration pack, you've got a number of options to continue to do those tasks. We provide PowerShell, Java, C#, .NET, scripting capabilities, so you can just dump your scripts straight into Opalis and Orchestrator and run it. You've got a web service integration activity that will point at any web service in the world and return back what all the payload options are, so you can use that to just configure and run. Or you can use the quick integration kit. So the quick integration kit allows you to build your own integration pack with your own activities. So if you have a homegrown application, if you have an enhancement, then you can create that integration pack and just simply use it yourself, or you can publish it up to Codeplex and give everybody the opportunity to do it. And we have a growing ecosystem around this from both partners and the community who are building these. And we've got a couple of examples where they've taken our base integration packs and added a lot more to them. So we provide a VMware vSphere integration pack. There's an updated one on the community which has taken our, I think there's about 19 or 20 activities, and they've expanded that out to more like 32. There's a Configuration Manager 2007 integration pack that exists, and there's about to be a community one which nearly triples the number of activities that are available. It's very extensible. It doesn't matter what your integration requirements are. So long as there is a surface to integrate to, then we can hit it with whatever that mechanism is. From an external integration point of view, you've got the SQL Server, which is the heart and soul. That's where everything's kept. That's where everything runs. And so long as the SQL Server is up and your runbook servers are going, basically you're good to go. That connects to the web service, and then the servers on the right-hand side is where the execution happens. So what happens is when a runbook is executed, it is compiled into an executable piece of code. It is copied down to the server out where it's going to execute, and it executes out there, and it updates the database as it executes through each of the activities. So, any questions before we jump in and start doing some stuff? Question down the front. So the question was, are there any agents? The answer is no. So there's no special networking required. There are some latency and packet loss considerations to take into effect as that runbook is executing down there on the remote server. It reports back to the SQL database. If it's actually doesn't, we thought it was latency, but our internal teams, we did a session yesterday with our internal teams. The thrash testing they've been doing and the performance testing they've been doing in terms of really stretching it out is that latency is not the biggest problem, packet losses. And when you get a certain level of packet loss, then you start to have runbook errors where it's not updating the database quick enough, and so the internal runbook engine starts to go off loss. So there is stretch testing required. If you've got a highly latent a network that has a lot of packet loss, then yes, that's going to be a consideration, and there's ways to work around that architecturally. But if you've got one in the center, then that's a consideration. Good question. Question? Why didn't we just use BizTalk? BizTalk is not a runbook engine. It is not a, there's some significant differences between the way what BizTalk does, which is about information, and it has a task engine. Runbook automation is very different from task execution. It's one of the big differences between Service Manager and its inbuilt workflow engine and a runbook automation tool. Okay, so a runbook automation tool is very dynamic, and it connects to the entire data center. BizTalk does not have a connected framework to every other solution and every other system in the world. Architecturally, they're very different under the hood, and in terms of scale and the way that they work, it just simply was not the right solution to do that.
You said that you did need an agent on the server?
No, there's no agent.
Is it using it's promoting? How's it getting?
Depends what you want to do. So if you're running a script, you can either do, if it's PowerShell as an example, you can use PowerShell remoting, or you can have the script run locally on the server and return the results. So the answer is it depends. Okay, and what an automation engine provides is the mechanism to run whatever it is that you run. How you run it, what it runs, is really down to what that activity does.
But the thing that's running on the client is a PS remote, essentially.
In that scenario.
In that scenario.
Yeah. It could just be a command line that's hitting an API, in which case it's just a web service or an API giving information back. There may or may not be anything running on a remote session. It all depends what it's doing. Yeah, good question. Yeah, they're very hard to catch. No one's been able to catch them yet. All right, question. Cool.
If you're only using, say, a couple of the components of the system center suite of products, where's, say you're only using an op manager and a configuration manager, that's still enough of those bits to make really efficient use of all policy or Orchestrator?
So the question was, if you only had something like configuration manager and operation manager, can you get value out of this? So are they the only technology components in your entire data center?
No.
Do you have any need to integrate different solutions from different parts of the organization as part of a process?
Really like third-party solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. So it doesn't really matter what you've got. It's really a matter of what you want to do. So I would flip your question around and say, what are the technology processes that you have today that you have either someone manually doing or you have some batch scripts with scheduled tasks or something like that, and what is your need to integrate and have all that moving around? And as you move to something like a private cloud, you move to a consumerization model where people are using all sorts of technology out there, you move to a self-service model, it's very dynamic, you're using some of the other technologies out there, how do you make it all work together? It's hardly ever about one or two things.
Is that where you make your own custom integration pack?
Depends on what you're using. There may be one out of the box, or you may need to build one, or it may be a partner. So in our session tomorrow, I know Alex has done some sessions already, but Alex Josh from NetApp is going to come up on stage and show you what NetApp are doing with Service Manager and Opalis and NetApp together. You will see the announcements around Cisco and NetApp together with Hyper-V Cloud and so forth. So it's about what you've got and what you need to be able to do and how you bring all of that together and then remove the manual and get I guess it's repeatability as well. As soon as a person does something, there's the risk that they'll do it different each time and not record what they did. They go on coffee breaks and take sick leave and all that kind of stuff. And what we're having the conversation with the IT pros in the audience is the question we get is, hey, you're taking our job away. No, we just think that you've got a different role in the future. Okay, I think that people that are sitting there doing very manual tasks, yes, there's an opportunity for you to reskill and do something else, because that's not going to happen in a private cloud kind of environment. All right, let's show some stuff. Okay, so who are the people in the audience that saw Opalis? Does that look remarkably familiar? That is System Center Orchestrator 2012. Looks very, very similar to those of you who's used Opalis 6.3. So what we have here is a number of components, and I'll just break this out so we can show things a little bit easier. Okay, so on the left-hand side here, we have our runbook library. This is where the runbooks are kept. You can have folders, you can delegate down permissions, and I'm going to show you what the delegation looks like and how that affects lots of different things. You have folders down the side, you have runbooks out here. On the right-hand side, we have the activities palette. Each line that you see here, so scheduling, monitoring, text file management, and so forth, is either a foundation object or it's an integration pack. In this case, everything on the right-hand side is a foundation object except the System Center options. So this is the System Center Configuration Manager integration pack. And these are the common tasks that are available inside the integration pack so that you can drag one of those out and it will go run that command against Configuration Manager. Same for Operations Manager, Service Manager, Data Protection Manager, and Virtual Machine Manager. There are a number of common activities that you can drag out, link together, and perform a task. So as an example, if you wanted to deploy a virtual machine with Virtual Machine Manager, you've got to create a VM from VHD or create a VM from a template. You could drag that out, create some disk, attach it to the storage, and then configure it. An example where we use something like PowerShell to supplement and build out an integration pack additionally is the Data Protection Manager integration pack. So it's got 8 activities inside the Data Protection Manager integration pack. One of them is not doing a SQL migration or a SQL database restore to a different SQL server. It is not an activity that the guys who created the integration pack put in there as a default activity. So what I did was worked with the team and said, what's the PowerShell command to do that? And so we created, or more to the point, they created and showed me how to do it, the PowerShell command that you run that actually tells DPM to recover that SQL database to a different SQL server. You can do it through the GUI, you can do it through PowerShell. I took that PowerShell command, I piped it in through the quick integration kit and created an integration pack. And the result is that I created an activity called recover SQL to a different SQL server with DPM. Okay? So that is a custom integration pack that I created using the PowerShell script they gave me, and then I deployed it out, and I can now use that as an activity. What's the difference between the PowerShell script that they gave me and the activity that's in there? You know, I want to take a guess what the main difference between those two things is?
You don't have to know PowerShell.
Beg your pardon?
You don't have to know PowerShell.
That's a good one, actually. I hadn't thought about that one. And the answer down here was you don't have to know PowerShell. That is also true, which I am not a PowerShell guy at all. No, the main thing is actually change control. I can't change what that activity does. The script is basically compiled into that activity as an icon. I can drag it out, I can use it. I can't change the script. If I was using a script, then that script can just be changed, edited, updated, and who would know? Okay, if I've got access to the file share, I could go change the script. Who changed it? I don't know, someone else did it. If you're lucky, you've got NTFS auditing turned on and you can try and go and figure it out. As soon as it's in an integration pack and it's deployed, you have a level of change control by definition because you need authority to deploy out an integration pack and you need authority to be able to change it. Okay, so it's pretty much the one main difference between just running scripts and activities in there versus compiling an IP is that ability to give it consistency and reliability with change control. And so we have this is a runbook out here, and this is actually a migration which I'll run a little bit later, which this actually does the SQL migration. And in this script, we're piping in some custom start data. Now, normally something like this would come from a change request or an incident. Just for demo purposes, we manually type in the name of the database, where it is, and where we want to move it to. But that would usually come from somewhere else. We go out and we validate that the data that we put in is unique. We go and get DPM to do a backup. You know, before you make any change, you always want a backup so you can get back to where you are. We take a recovery point. We go get that latest recovery point, and just as a bit of a belt and braces as far as migration goes, we're going to dump the SQL database out to a network share and make that available in its raw format. And then we do something pretty cool where we compile a custom PowerShell script. So this is the version where there's 3 activities there that build the script that I compiled into that activity. And the way that we do that, there's many different ways to do it. You can either write the script line by line as part of an activity, or in this case, we've got a template file that we update with we pump in the dynamic data, and then we run that PowerShell script, and then we shut out the incident that we raised in Service Manager. So that's an example of a fairly standard procedure that you can automate. And the benefit of having automated there is that it's done the same way every time. You can make it a self-service on request, delegated down model kind of scenario without the need to log a ticket. We still capture all that information about the fact that the change was done, but you don't need to log a ticket, you don't need someone to do it, and you've brought all of those different components together. Excuse me. So I want to show you a couple of things. Actually, wrong one. Let's go back to this one. So one of the things that was not optional in the Opala 6.3 product was the installation. You guys that in the room who've done Opalas, did you install the operator console? Was that fun? Yeah, I'm guessing the answer is no. So this is the new Orchestrator install. And I want to take you from installing the product to actually using the product and how you build runbooks out, just to give you a flavor for all the different pieces, okay? If this gets boring, please tell me. We'll do something else. Please ask questions. We can demo anything you want here, but I'm going to take you through a bit of a staged migration here. So installing Orchestrator simply looks like this. We pipe in some information. It's going to say which components do you want to install. We have the management server, which is kind of required, otherwise it doesn't work. A runbook server, which is the execution item. The web console, you may or may not want the web console on here, and then the runbook designer, which can also just be installed onto a Windows 7 box as well. We'll install the whole lot. It's going to go out and do a prerequisite check and see that we have enough hardware and that we have all the prerequisites installed. The prerequisites for Orchestrator are the IIS role, if you put the web console on. It's a Silverlight console that runs in IIS, and .NET 4.0. That's it. Okay? As long as those are in there. You do need a SQL 2008 R2 database server somewhere. It can be locally on the box, or it can be a remote database server. It just needs to be SQL 2008 R2. Now we're going to get a warning here. I have a virtual machine that doesn't quite have enough RAM. That's fine. We'll just carry on. We can tick the box. I do not have IIS installed. We tick the box and say, yes, please enable the IIS role, and it puts all the appropriate IIS subcomponents in place. That takes a sec just to run through.
And your components?
Beg your pardon?
On the 4 components that were listed up there,
Sure.
Runbook server was listed.
Yes.
Action server was not. Are those the same thing?
So Action Server has been renamed to Runbook Server.
Okay.
So the main components that have changed, the management service is still the management service. Action servers become runbook servers. The Opalis client becomes the runbook designer. And the operator console becomes the orchestration console. And we renamed that one simply because it moved from Java to Silverlight, and we just need to get rid of that altogether. All right, so the prerequisites are now installed. It's going to ask us for the service account that we want to run this under. Best practices are to use an account with the least amount of privileges that you can possibly give it and still be able to function. I'm just going to be really naughty and just use the domain administrator, because this is a demo environment, and this should fail. And it does. And that's simply because it's going out and it needs to check that it has the log on as a service right. It does not have it. In the beta, we have to manually add this in. I've asked for this to become an automatic feature in the release candidate. Sorry, can you just say that a little bit louder?
Sorry. Is that the credentials that it's going to run all the tasks, or can you specifically delegate tasks to credentials?
So the question was, is that the account that's going to run the tasks or different? This is the service account, so this is what's going to run the service. This one that we are running is actually the runbook server. So yes, this account is what's going to execute the runbook. It doesn't mean that it needs access to every system that the runbook contains, but it needs authority to be able to execute the runbook, okay? Not the components of the runbook. So
Specifically in your DPM example, if you wanted to delegate that to a help desk to not give them permissions on DPM,
yep.
so you can just do that.
Correct. So that I'll show you what that looks like in a sec. This is the infrastructural install to get Orchestrator running. You can delegate down the authority to run the runbook in a different way, and I'll show you that in a sec. So we do that retest. We're up. We're good. We're going to go next. Where is our SQL server? I've got it running locally on here. It runs with Windows authentication. We'll just leave the database as Orchestrator, and that's going to head off. All right, we get to choose a management group, and this is the people that are going to have rights to log on and actually create runbooks. Okay, so by default, I'm just going to leave it as administrator, and I am going to, however, allow people to run the runbook designer from remote. If you want to lock it down, you can create a single account that must log on to the local server in order to run the designer, if you want to get really narrow about it. Or you can create a group that can connect from anywhere, which is a much better idea, and run the console remotely. We install that. You'll ask for 2 ports. In this example, we're running both the web service and the orchestration console. So we need a port for the web service, and that's the inbound connector that we're going to look at shortly. And then the orchestration port is the web console. Okay, so if you just want to use port 80 and 81, that's fine. If you want to use whatever you want, it defaults to 81 and 82. That's it. You'll see one little interesting thing there. It still says Opalis software. That will change. That didn't quite make the code check in for the beta. And that's going to go off and do the install. So that takes around about 3 or 4 minutes to run through, and I don't think it's very interesting to watch little green ticks go down the right-hand side. But that is the installation experience. That's it. Okay? You will be able to fully automate this as well. Okay? So it will be scriptable. So if you want to deploy Orchestrator, you can automate the installation of the automation engine if you really want to go there. But basically, that's going to go through. Let's just go that quick. The web service and orchestration console tends to take the longest. That's copying down the IIS components. It's going to go off and run a PowerShell script that it's going to do the IIS configuration of the Silverlight console and then do some final config, set the database up, and put the schema in place and so forth. And that's basically the installation experience. That's it. Was there a question?
Is the product going to remain 32-bit?
Yes. The question was, is it going to remain 32-bit? For Orchestrator, the answer is yes. Sorry, that was a terrible throw. Throw like an Australian. Where's Alexander? All right, so that's the installation experience. So I won't bore you by letting that finish, but basically that's done. So what you end up with, once you've done that, is an orchestration console. And this is the almost beta version of the orchestration console. So what we have here, this is a Silverlight console that is sitting on top of that web service, and this is talking back to the runbook engine, and it is showing you what's going on. So the first page you get, and I do apologize for the eggshell blue on dark blue kind of font and color there, but the numbers that you see here are the number of runbooks that have executed, whether they have failed completely, whether they have completed with warnings, or whether they have been successful, whether they are in progress. You can see we have 3 runbooks here that are executing right now. I have a number of monitors running in the background that are creating the statistical information, and we can see what's going on. If we go and take a look at these runbooks, we're logged in as administrator here, so we are seeing everything. Okay, I'm going to show you what the delegated rights looks like in a minute. If I click on runbooks and give that a chance to refresh down, these are the runbooks that I have in the environment. You can see that we have the monitors that are running at the moment, creating that information. You can see that this one's run 967 times successfully without fail. This one here is always warning, which is good because it's the deliberate warning one. And then the deliberate fail is there. And so you can see we've got a couple of failures as well. Now what this means is that these ones that were supposed to be successful but 2 failed, I can drill into that, take a look at when it ran, drill into the details, and I see a graphical representation not only of what the runbook looks like, which will come up in a sec. It's just got one icon, 2 there. It's got 2 activities here. And if we take a look at the activity details, we can see that it failed, and we can see why. It's because I stopped it. But if there's some failures in there as well that show that the file wasn't found and so forth. So this is your monitoring, start, stop, troubleshooting kind of mechanism that you can see what's going on in the environment. This is also where we can trigger the starting of runbooks as well. So we have that SQL migration runbook. If we want to start that, we click on Start, and it's going to ask us for those 3 pieces of information that we wanted to see. As again, this would normally come from an incident or a change request. Database, well, let's move the stock trader database. From destination server is DB01, and we're moving it from DB02. We'll run it on the one orchestration server that we have. We start that, and we're good to go. That has now initiated that runbook, and it is executing in the background. Take a look at what's going on here, and we can see there is the definition. And we should see, I should have clicked on View Instances, would be a whole lot better. We can see it is executing, view the details, and now we see in real time, once this refreshes, now we will see in real time, if I started that, there it is, right. The green tick's going along, and we can see exactly where this runbook is. So we can see that we've validated that the data was accurate. We've raised a ticket inside Service Manager. Go and take a look at Service Manager, do a refresh. We should see that we have a new incident there. The number is IR118. Remember that number? We will see that again shortly. So if we just minimize a few things down here so we can see what's going on. Ugh. All right, let's bring some of this up. So we can see, so I'll come back to that. We raised an incident, not a change request. No approval is required to fix an incident. It's broken. We want it back up as quickly as we can. Would depend on why we were using the database. In this case, we're using an incident, but we can come back to that. So the DPM has done the backup. The next thing we're going to see is a pop in the SQL folder. We're going to dump the SQL database out to a network share. There it is. It's now restoring the SQL database to a folder. We can search for, there it is. It's coming down there. We've built a dynamic PowerShell script and we've piped in the IR number. So we're executing a very specific script just for this, and we know which script was used to do this exact migration. And if we do some refreshes up in the SQL Server, excuse me, itchy nose, there it is. The database is now restoring. That's a very small database. That is now complete. It's going to circle back around. We've got some green ticks. Circle back around and close that incident, let that finish, go back to Service Manager, do a refresh and resolve. Now that's a very simple example of a migration, but it just shows you all the bits coming together. Now the question over here was where was the approval to move it? The scenario that we're running here is it was an incident. Something's gone wrong, the database has gone down, could be a DR scenario. We didn't want an approval, so we just did it. Could you stop for an approval? Absolutely. You want to raise a change request, you want to raise an incident, route it off, do an email, wait for someone to say, yes, you can do it, no problem. Okay? The point of this demo is simply to show you the whole thing in flight, so it all just executes within a short space of time. And so that's how we do a simple runbook, that's how we execute it, those are the different pieces coming together. Now when it comes to delegation, it's something that we've had for a while, but we just expose it in a slightly better way now, is we can look at the permissions and we can see who has access to an individual folder and who has access to the runbooks within it. So I've got a delegated runbooks folder here, and we can see that Bob James has authority to see the runbooks in this folder, but as you saw, if I click back on the other one, the migration runbooks, he does not. Okay, he's only got access to that one folder. So if we jump over to a machine where Bob has been logged in. Ooh. What we'll see is that we've delegated down the rights for Bob to execute those runbooks and see them in there. He does not, however, have access to the console. So if he tries to launch the runbook designer, if he manages to get a hold of it somehow, and we point it at the Orchestrator server, it's going to come back and say access denied. Okay, so you could lock down the runbook designer, and that is a good practice. Very few people should have access to the runbook designer. If you've got access to the runbook designer, you can break stuff. You can create, you can debug, but with great power comes great responsibility. You don't want lots of people having access to the designer. Okay, that's a very powerful tool, and you want to make sure that the people that have access to that are appropriately trained, they know what they're doing, they know about change control and testing and development and production environments and so forth. This is a tool that if you use it wrong, you can break stuff really quickly. If you have access to a system, say you have full access to, if you're a domain admin, you could create a runbook that shut down every server in the environment and it'll go do it real quick, because if you've got authority to do it, it's going to go execute it really fast. Okay? So there's a lot of power there, and you need to be careful with it. Question? That is a great question. So the question was, does the testing console, the question is really, what security context does the testing console run in? So as with Opalis, it's exactly the same with Orchestrator. The runbook service that executes is a service account. When you use the runbook designer test console, that is going to use the credentials of the logged in user. Okay, so it does execute the runbook in real time. If you do it in a production environment and go, oh, I just tested shutting down that server, it's going to go shut down that server if you've got authority to do it. But it runs it in the context that you logged in. When you run it, it uses the service account. Okay, so we separate that deliberately so that you can test without needing to know the service account password and things like that. Question way over there in the corner.
When you're creating a runbook, do you have the option to specify as part of the parameters you're passing in, like, say I want to be notified every time this runbook is run, or is that another part of the system?
So the question is, if you create a runbook, can you be notified whenever it executes and so forth? So the answer is yes, and the way that you do that is maybe the first activity you have is notify me that this is running. So there's no mechanism per se that you're going to get a notification just because it started. There's a management pack coming for Orchestrator, which would allow you to have Ops Manager raise an alert if you started a specific runbook. But the built-in tool, the first activity you would have is send an email or whatever to say, I'm running. That's how you could do it at a couple of different levels there.
And that can be on the fly as to say, if you want to do a secret.
I'm going to create a runbook in a sec, and I'll show you how you subscribe to data, and I'll show you how you kind of link these things together and how you would use something like send me an email if I've just started.
So if you weren't using Ops Manager, is there a logging that you could audit to see who actually, to see like the person may have run a bad run and killed a whole bunch of stuff?
Certainly is. So the question is there logging? The answer is yes. So you have, if I go and take a look at that migration runbook, the one that we just ran, you have a log of the fact that it ran. So this is now in the log history, and you can see all of the different tasks that were actually done in the execution of that. You also have log events. If you want, you can have it log into the event log. Okay, so there's many different ways of logging the fact of who did it, who started it, where did it come from. It's kind of in multiple locations. It's really down to how do you want to be notified that it ran. Do you want to get an email? Do you want to get a page? Do you want to get an alert? Do you want to get a ticket logged? Again, which is the most appropriate way for you to be notified that someone did something? And there may be many runbooks that you don't really need to know every time they ran that particular one, but maybe there's one that does something a little bit gnarlier and you really want to know when that one happens. You can go figure out who started it. So if we go and take a look at the console, we're now logged in as Bob. What you can see is that he doesn't see the whole tree. He only sees the delegated runbooks. So if we go and take a look at that, you can see he can only see the delegated runbooks folder, and it's only got one runbook in it called test. Okay, and it's never run.
Can I take you back to your SQL example? Is there
Where's that coming from?
back here,
Oh, sorry.
any possible way to attach the files you generated, your scripts, directly to a ticket and save it for financial regulatory reasons?
Sure. Does the ticket system that you're integrating with have the ability to take attachments?
For example, could we just take it to
So, but my answer is still the same. If your ticket system has the ability to have an attachment put into it, then the answer is yes. Orchestrator does nothing. Orchestrator tells other things what to do. So if you have a ticket system that can have a ticket logged and you can put an attachment into that, then the answer is yes. Yeah. It's that kind of catch-22 thing of it does nothing but it does everything. And it really is a matter of Service Manager, for example. Yes, you can put text file attachments, I think, into Service Manager incidents. Someone in Service Manager might be able to know that.
Is it a common use case for users to actually run the runbooks, or for systems to have an event that calls the runbook executes?
Yes, to all the above. So the question is it common for users to run runbooks? It depends on what the runbook is. Okay, so that is a good point. I don't think there's, well, personally I haven't seen that many runbooks that a user, an end user, would go and run. Having said that, you might have a process that requires something to trigger it to happen, and you don't want to do it through a self-service portal or something along those lines. You actually want to trigger a runbook. You could do that. I think at the moment today, most of these would be IT pros who want to go to somewhere and say, I want to run that particular task, or it's a long-running monitor in the background. Yeah. So we can see that. Now, the other thing, I want to show you two more things. Checking, yeah, we've got some time. So reporting is something that we've added as well. So that web service that we're using to talk to, it's an OData REST-based service, and what that means is that anything that can connect to a data feed can go and get the information about what's going on. And I want to show you this in two different contexts. We're going to use Power Pivot just because I can. We're going to take the data feed, we point straight at the Orchestrator server on port 81, do a test, and straight away we can come back and it's going to go talk to the web service and say, what have you got? These are the tables inside the database that are exposed in the web service in the beta. And the most interesting ones for demo purposes are the runbook instances and the runbooks. We tick those two, and that's going to go off and it's going to get all of that information. Now we're going to leave that one. That one's going to take a sec. It's going to pull out back a couple of thousand rows. What I want to show you is what that looks like when we run it on Bob's machine when he's only been delegated down a subset. Because what it does is it filters down and only gives Bob back the statistics that he is allowed to see. Okay, so if we run that same Power Pivot window back up, connect to the data feed, check to make sure it's working. Yes, it is. Go next. Tick those same two things, runbook instances and runbooks. what we'll find is that we should get 0 rows back in the first and 1 row back in the second, which is correct because we have one runbook and it's never been executed. And simply, he gets to see the test runbook, and that's all he gets to see. Okay, so the web service is not only providing the information, it's providing it in a contextual manner. If you delegate down a set of runbooks to a particular business unit and they run the analysis and the reporting, they will get the data back about their runbooks. HR is not going to see finances information and so forth. So that's what that looks like on this side. You can see we've got 1,800 rows on this side because I'm an administrator and 7 runbooks. And if we take a look at those, you can see that we see all of those runbooks because we're the administrator and we can see all of them. Okay? Contextual-based analysis and reporting. Hook this into any tool that can take a data feed and away you go. So that's the only thing I can't show you is the PowerShell provider. Now, building runbooks, connecting to them, and being able to link them together and subscribe to that information. So we had a question there about can you notify. So we've got a few ways of notifying. We can do platform events, we can do event logs and so forth. An easy example that would be quite easy in that scenario is to say, if a runbook starts, then send me an email. So we can drag that out. We've got a run program, so we're going to trigger something, and then I want to be sent an email to say that it has run. Actually, let's take something like file management. Say we're going to get a copy of file. Let's actually attach that, reattach into there, drag that one up into the middle, relink those, drive a mouse, relink those together. Okay, so what we have is the ability to look at each of these activities in their own right. So this is a program execution. You can either run a program or you can run a command. You can pipe in security credentials. So credentials happen at many different levels, and this is something that I'm going to spend a little bit of time on. You can run the activity in a particular security context. You also have a connection level for the integration pack. So this is a question that comes up quite a bit. I've got a ticketing system and I've got levels 1, 2, and 3. I want them to only be able to do what they're allowed to do against the back-end system. How do I do that in Orchestrator or Opalis, as the questions have been? The way we do that is we use different connection strings. Okay, so we've got one connection string here, and it is using the Contoso OIS user account. We could have 3 different connections with 3 different user accounts that have 3 different sets of information and use the correct one at the right level. Okay? When you drag out something like a service manager icon, and this runbook will not execute in any way, shape, or form because it doesn't link together in any particular way, you get to choose which connection string it is. We've only got one. When you create the runbook, you choose which account set, which connection string you want to use. This all comes down to the delegation model and thinking about who's going to execute and where you're going to delegate rights and who's got access to the designer and so forth. If you've got access to the designer, you can choose the connection string. If you don't have access to the designer, but you've only got access to the web console and you're only delegated down one runbook, all you can do is run it. Okay? So it allows you to configure runbooks in the way you want them to run and delegate down the permissions in order to run them. In this case, we're running Service Manager. We can choose the source class. This is going to go out and dynamically poll Service Manager, pull back all of the different classes that are available. This will take a sec to come back for the first time. It's building that list quickly. Come on. Here we go. So maybe what are we doing? We're creating a link. Maybe we create a link between the Active Directory user. A user can be linked against. There you go. There's a file attachment one. Good score. Has file attachment. Now here's the GUID. So this is an example where if we were going to create a relationship, we'd need to do a get on those objects to find out what they were. So let's actually do that. If we did a get activity, bring that out, put that one in there instead, link that together. So I'm just going to take a look at that one. Now the object GUID, we could subscribe to return data, go to the get activity. Of course, it hasn't actually gone and got anything, but normally GUID would be in that list. Oh, it's actually get activity. I need to get object. I do apologize. That's why it's not working. now I should have no, I'm not getting anything back. That's interesting. Not a behavior I'm expecting to see. It's a beta. All right. So the way, and that was an example of how we link things together, is that anywhere that there is a field, you can right-click and subscribe to return data. And this is the data bus in action. All the information, all the things that are executing on the fly are all in there. And if we go and take a look at the one that we executed just before, the close incident one, which is right at the end. So you can see here that this is the data bus for all of those activities that have run. And we can go all the way back to creating the incident, and there's the object GUID that was created in Service Manager. You don't need to know it. You don't need to go and get it. We created the object, so therefore we know everything about the object. All of that information is on the data bus. We're just able to right-click and subscribe to it. What this means is that you're creating very dynamic pieces of information all the way through. If we take a look at the PowerShell script that was created, that file was called SQL migration-IR118. Now, in the runbook, we didn't know what that was called. We called it SQL migration please go get whatever the number was, .ps1. Okay, so you can get that information, you can inject it in anywhere. You can get all those pieces of information. Maybe you want to transform the data, you add two things together. A great example was in the creation of that incident back in Service Manager. If you have a look at the title, if I expand that out, if you have a look at the Service Manager, it says database migration triggered for DB02/StockTrader. The way we put that together is we concatenated two pieces of textual information where it says database migration triggered for, there's the piece of information we typed in, / another piece of information we typed in. Okay? And that's the kind of thing, if you think about anything you want to do and you're writing scripts and you want to put things together, the database gives you all of that information and enables you to interact with it all the way through. Question?
So do you see product teams releasing runbooks for common tasks or commands, for example, exchange failover for clusters?
So the question, sorry. So the question is, do we see our product teams building ready-made runbooks for common activities within our solutions? That is the end goal. Whether it's done by the product team, whether it's done by us, the Solution Accelerator team, I don't know. But the end goal is to, once we get the migration to Orchestrator under control and out the door, which is the primary focus at the moment, is to move the code base across and adhere to CSE and so forth, then we want to be able to provide you with lots of quick start guides. We've got lots of blog posts about how to do things, but we very much see a library of runbooks being created and made available, kind of like the way you go looking for a management pack today or something where you can go to Pinpoint and search. We want to start using Pinpoint. We want to publish out certified runbooks, which says if you want to do activity foo, then go search for foo and it'll give you, hey, here's some activities, you drag them down. It gives you most of what you want. You may need to modify it. You just need to go plug your information in and it's good to go. Yeah, we very much see that as a goal. You've got one. You've got one too. What's up?
Is it flexible enough to run to an iOS upgrade on the Cisco router? How flexible is it?
So can you automate that process today? Can you run a command that does it? Then the answer is yes. So if you can do something today, either through a command line or a script or a batch file or something, if you can automate the activity, then we can use this to put some repeatability and some change control around that and move away from, I go double click on that file, to I can do it in here, and now we've got auditing and repeatability and change control applied to that task. Absolutely. And that's the real power. That there's a couple of activities that I'd call out. The run.NET script one, for example, if I just drag that one out. This enables you out of the box to run C#, JScript, PowerShell, and VB, and you just dump your code in there and basically it executes, right? So that kind of thing, along with the, where is it? It's under the utilities. Invoke web service. And basically, this one's another very powerful one where it basically just says, what's your WSDL? When you run this, it goes to the WSDL, it does a get, and it returns all the payloads that are available that you can pipe in. And then you can use published data to pipe in against the payload. So you can go get all your different pieces of information and just throw it at the web service. Okay, so this is why we get lots of questions, and Charles has published lots of blog posts around, well, there's not an integration pack for. whatever the name is. It actually doesn't matter. The integration packs are designed to get you going quickly, but then you can build out whatever you like using the built-in foundation activities, any kind of command line, web service, API. Question?
So for running .NET script, can it be just a snippet of code, or does it have to be a fully functional C# application?
So the question is, in the .NET script, does it need to be fully functional? It needs to be functional in its own right. And it doesn't need to do everything you want to do. If you want to chunk it up that says, first, you need to be able to run that command line in an executed way and get a payload back. So if you had half a line of code, well, that's not going to work because it doesn't know what to do with it. But if it's a line of code that will execute and give you a result, and then you want a second activity that then does something else, you can either have it line by line all the way through the activity, or you could have two activities, one after the other. That's your choice. So PowerShell is a good example. You can have one big PowerShell script that does everything, or you can run one thing, get the results, move to the next thing. And what you can do is things like branching. See, we've only got one flow all the way through here, right? But let's say that we put this down here, and then we actually have a branch out. If I could drive a mouse would help. We can have two different outcomes here. So now the validate server name's got two possible paths. And what these links are not just links together, they're actually conditions. And so you can say, well, dependent on the outcome, maybe we say that the server name, maybe the computer name, if that comes back and it matches some sort of criteria, then go left. If it matches another set of criteria, go right. If you get a result that you've got no idea what to do with, go somewhere else. Okay, so all of this multiple branching thing kicks in. And a best practice is to chunk your runbooks down into small executable patterns where one piece executes and finishes, publishes the data out, and then another one kicks in depending on where you go. And if you look at the big runbooks, they're all chunked down into very small bite-sized chunks. There's two very good reasons, or three very good reasons for that. One is to do exactly what you talked about, being able to execute them individually. Second of all, it's easier to manage. And third of all, from an architectural point of view, that's a better thing. Because when a runbook is executing, it takes up resources on the runbook server. If it's polling in the background, it's using all that piece of resource. So if you've got a runbook that got loads of information, that's all running, taking up resources over there until it finishes. So the best practice is to run a runbook and execute and export out to a database or publish data, all of that information, drop it from the runbook server, gives the resources back. Start the next task that then kicks on and keeps going.
So then how do you get away with not having being able to do this without agents? Particularly in some cases, when you're monitoring, it isn't necessarily directly queryable.
So the question is how to get away with doing it with agents. So a lot of these tasks that are here don't require agents. So to run a PowerShell script, does that require an agent? No, because you've got PowerShell remoting.
Certain app monitoring, that sort of require agents. If you want to write a runbook that's dependent on some threshold being generated or error being generated by an app on a remote machine, unless you have an agent, you're not going to see it.
So this question. So in that scenario, that's an operations manager. In that particular scenario, operations manager would pick up the fact that a threshold got triggered and would have that information in operations manager. We would get that from operations manager, not from here.
You're relying on the ops manager agent.
So yeah, absolutely. You come back to Orchestrator, does nothing until you connect it to something. You can use other agents that are out there. Orchestrator doesn't need an agent simply because to execute something, an agent's just over here. You can just remotely run it. Question over the back. Oh, the front, sorry.
What need if you have put multiple servers? How well does it size up? How many jobs can you run?
From an execution point of view? Yeah. So the question is, how many runbook servers do you need? And this is an absolute true answer. It depends. It really does. And it's funny, we had this conversation yesterday in the internal session because I can have a runbook that has one activity that flatlines your runbook server because it has so much data and so much compute resource required that it can run one runbook. I could give you another runbook that had 50 icons on there that did nothing. How many of those can you execute? It all depends what your runbook's doing, what it is executing, what its resource requirements are, whether it's going to run long, what its payload looks like, how much information is required. There is no way that I can tell you how many you can run because it all depends what you build. Okay, so it comes down to your runbooks. When you've got them running, you can run them. You need to basically monitor the server when you execute it and see how much resource it takes to run that runbook. And it all depends what you've got. If you've got a PowerShell command that's doing lots of stuff and getting lots of information, that's going to use lots of CPU and lots of RAM.
Is that ridiculous because there is no agent, so you can't leverage the mobile process?
No, it's just got to do with the execution of a command. If I run ipconfig, it's a very small executable with a very small payload, versus running setup.exe, which is a bigger application with a lot more overhead. Two different executables with very different performance requirements and very different performance personas. Knowing with or without an agent wouldn't actually change that at all. It all comes down to what you're executing and how it executes.
Can you set up some kind of a pool with cluster or something?
So that's a good. You can ask the question. So you can. We've only got one runbook server here, but you can have as many runbook servers as you want. By default, if a runbook fails whilst it is executing, it will restart on another runbook server. Okay, so if you've got two runbook servers, by default it will round robin 1 1 1 1 1 1. And second of all, if a runbook fails, like the server becomes unavailable, network drops, it crashes, restart, whatever, it will restart the runbook on the other server. What's wrong with restarting a runbook? What happened to the other bit that was halfway through executing all that information? Another reason why you chunk it down into small bite-sized chunks and you architect your runbook so that the first activity is, was I already underway? Okay, and the way you do that is you put out a checkpoint or some sort of file or some sort of database record. If you talk to Mark and Charles about how they do this in the real world, they have an integration pack literally that writes out to a database, this is where I am. And their first activity in any runbook is go check and see whether I was midway through processing. If I was, go pick it up and start again from there. If I wasn't, fine, carry on. It comes down to the way you build your runbooks and the way that you architect it so that you can restart them.
Now you've got these pretty runbooks.
Yeah.
Is there a view to actually show, like you have a text view, the documenting the actual runbook as it sits?
Not in the. So the question was, is there a documentational aspect? Not in the base product. There is an add-on from Bruno Sale, who's one of our internal guys over in France. He's built an exporter that will take this out to Visio and also out to Word, and it basically takes the picture and tells what it does and stuff. There's no reason why not. It's just that it was not built in the product we bought. And it's just below the waterline as far as Orchestrator is concerned. All the information you're looking for is in the Orchestrator database, so there's no reason why it can't be extracted and put in, which is effectively what Bruno has done. Yeah. There was a question over here.
What's the learning curve, say, IT pros bringing this in?
You got a ball? That's a great question. What is the learning curve for doing this? So, 17th of May, I've worked with this product for 13 months. I never saw the product before March last year. Part of my interview process was to do a demo with it, and I'd never used it before. So I literally had 3 days to build a runbook and execute it as part of my interview loop. It is not hard to do basic things, okay? The interface is you create a runbook, you drag things out. You saw I just linked some stuff together, right? Doing that is not a problem. Drag, drop, link things together, that's awesome. There's two things that take a lot of time. One is that work around what is it you're trying to do and what is the right way to do it. And that's not a technological question. That's a whiteboard, piece of paper, business level discussion on what does this do? Is approval required? What is the information required? What do we do with it? When do we stop for manual approval versus just do it all the way through? All of that takes a lot of time, and it's not a technological question. From once you've got that information and how you build it out, that basically just comes down to looking through the palette that's there and saying, I need to do this. What is the best way to do this? And then the next thing I do is that. And in this, if you look at something like the migration, we decided that we wanted to validate the information. So the first thing we needed to do is say, well, what are we validating against? We're validating a server name, so we go out to VMM and say, is this a real server or not? Then we do a unique name, we create an incident. Mapping that out, took about half a day to work through how would I do it. Building it was quite quick once I knew what the steps were. Okay, so it's not about learning how to use the product. It's like saying, how hard is it to use Visio? Well, it's pretty easy. You just drag stuff out and link it together. But is it the diagram you wanted? really, this is a diagram that just executes something at each individual level. Okay, that can take a bit longer. I still don't know how to use every tool that's in the palette, and I have no need to know that. But I think people ramp up to a dangerous level very quickly. Okay, and that's the reality. This is a tool. As I said, I'm running as domain admin. If I have an activity in there that says shut a server down or delete something, it's going to go do it really quick. Okay, so getting dangerous quickly is easy. Getting very good and knowing how to do really complex things, that takes just time and experience and so forth. And we do have training courses for that as well. Sorry, there's actually a couple of questions over here, guys, that were up for you.
Can you like change it midstream or something? I mean, what if you have a run book that you mentioned that you have an ability to have an approval? So what if the approver says, yes, this can go on,
Yep.
but not until the next day?
So you would need to architect the runbook such that the monitor that was waiting for the approval had something that said, and when can I do it? So how would the person say, do it at 2 a.m. tomorrow? There would have to be a field or a piece of text somewhere in something to say the time that it could then execute, right? So you need to tell it, how would it know that it can start at 2 o'clock? If you can capture that information somewhere, then you can have the monitor go, hey, it's approved, and then go look for the second piece of information is 2 o'clock. So the answer is yes, but you need to work out how are you going to capture that someone said yes, but, versus yes, just go. And so from a service manager point of view, you would have a ticket that would probably have a field in which says, yes, you can do it, and not until tomorrow. Cool, no problem. The monitor says look for approval, and once it's approved, then the next thing is when am I allowed to start? All right, it's 7 o'clock, all right? I can't start till 7, and it sits there and waits. So the answer is absolutely you can do that. So there's a question down over here.
So, got two questions going back to previous ones.
Yeah.
One is, you know, as you said, you can get things quickly. So what sort of analytics do you have for finding out problems in the actual processes of the run book?
So, yeah, okay.
And the second, kind of related to that is, can I import what import languages from older, previous, other competing automation projects?
So the first question was, how do you know what's going on midstream? And that's completely not my box. So if you were here earlier on, so the orchestration console shows what's going on, and when you look at the job, you can see what was actually executed and so forth. So you can view, if I get into that information, view the instances, that one, view the details. You can see the activity details that's going to take to come back. So you can drill in midstream and see what's executing and where it's up to, and you can see what activity did, and if it failed, then you can see what's going on. So I've got 2 minutes left. I want to show you a couple more pieces of information. Orchestrator will be supported on Server 2008 R2 and SQL 2008 R2. The designer will also run on Windows 7. You can export and import of runbooks, so from Opala 6.3 to Orchestrator, not the other way around. There's no backwards export. The format has changed. So if you've created stuff in Opalis, you can export it and import it into Orchestrator. The legacy activities, if you're using Opalis today, the legacy activities have gone. So they're not there, and there are some foundational activity changes as well. The blog post I put out in a couple of hours' time will have details. The Java JBoss console is gone. It's been replaced by the IIS Silverlight console. We are globalizing Orchestrator, which means that it will run on any operating system. It's just the application is still in English. We will change the application in localization in a future release. Yes, there will be an Operations Manager management pack. It will come out with Orchestrator when it's released later this year. Yes, we are remediating the IPs. It takes some time. We need to make sure that we should have the integration pack. We need to look at what the activities do, what the scenarios are, what we're going to support. And then last of all, we need to adhere to all the EULAs of the third party when it comes to integration, which if anyone has ever done that, you'll know that that takes quite a long time to work through. That's the complete list. All of these slides are available, including a lot that I have hidden in order to do lots of demo. So if you grab the slides, you'll see all the background stuff that is typically there. There will be 4 new IPs that come out in the beta timeframe, a new Active Directory version, a new FTP, a new VMware vSphere supporting 4.1, and IBM Tivoli Netcore Omnibus, whichever that's referred to. There will be more information about IPs being updated in the future. Creating an integration pack, we talked about that, didn't have a lot of time to go through it, but certainly you can do it. There's a Technic Gallery. We're going to be using Pinpoint and Technic Gallery to publish IPs and runbooks and so forth. And if you want a link, msft.it/Opalis resources takes you to a page which has all the other links you'd ever want with every piece of information about Opalis, including lots of videos on how to get go and so forth. From a roadmap point of view, we are heading into beta in June, looking at a release candidate around about September with an RTM somewhere closer to Christmas after the RC, depending on how that goes. So that's where it is at. There is an evaluation program if you want to have a crack with Orchestrator Beta. If you go to the Orchestrator booth down in the marketplace, there is a form you can fill out. If you fill that form out, then you will get an email the minute that the beta is available to download. I will be running a program where we step you through using Orchestrator, installing it, common scenarios. You'll have integration, or rather the ability to talk to the product group and so forth, and ask lots of questions and give feedback about what you'd like to see in the product. That is it. Sorry that went for a long run. I am completely out of time. I will be here and available afterwards if you've got questions. Thank you very much.